playoffs are heating up as the first round is over. We move on to the conference semifinals. Right here on Hot Sport, we got you covered with our previews, our predictions for this second round, our expert analysis, right here on the NBA show. And welcome back to our NBA show. This is episode 2. And I hope you guys have been enjoying our NBA dailies on Instagram. They've been cooking off every single day, so you can see my coverage, my reviews to every single game. We already have one review in for this round, which was Minnesota against Denver, game 1. So I'm not going to spoil that, just in case you're watching this, but you probably would know the score of that game. However, as I mentioned in my NBA daily for that, the game 1 score does not really change how I feel about this series. Before we really kick into it, and we only really have four matchups to review, so we shouldn't be taking so long with you today on this episode. But before we get into anything, please, if you're watching this video, I'm aware of plenty of people who are watching these videos without hitting the subscribing button. So just to help you guys out, if you want to check out these videos and see when they come out, hit the subscribe button because I know you're watching the content anyway. Get your notification bells. Hit the like button. I mean, the likes on these videos should be going through the roof. I've got 121 subscribers and an average of 3 likes per video. Let's get that up. Let's try to build this hot sport community and get it kicking. All right, we got so much content coming out for you today, especially. We're working around the clock. We're staying up late to make sure we're recording these videos and we're getting them out to you. So I'm really happy for the support we've had right now, but let's keep building momentum. I'm now very aware of many people watching these videos without taking any action, without subscribing, without liking. Come on, guys. Let's do it. All right? So we are now covering our first Western Conference matchups, our first Western Conference semifinal. And we might as well kick it off with the Timberwolves and the Nuggets because that's how the NBA decided to kick off this round with an already game 1 that was in the books. And I mentioned in my NBA daily that there were a couple things that I'm looking out for in this series following what happened in the previous series. Oh, hey. It's with the balloons. I don't get it. Anyway, so the 2 things that I was watching out for, and I said it was more just based off kind of notes that I've been taking along the way as these playoffs are going on. And there are a few things that were transpiring in the first series for each of them. In the Nuggets series, it was that they always almost had to come back in many of their games against the Lakers, that they seem to play their best basketball from behind. And in the first round against the Lakers team who has a history now with the Nuggets of non-success, especially in the last couple of years. Now they've only got 1 win in the playoffs over 2 series, so they're 1-8 against the Nuggets. So they just have a PTSD about getting it over the line against the Nuggets. I think against a Minnesota Timberwolves team that is full of confidence, it's a lot more naive to that. They're a lot less scarred. And they're also very familiar with the Nuggets in terms of having played them. They're division rivals, so they play each other 4 times a year. And so there's a familiarity there between these 2 teams. I don't believe that how the 2 teams play, that it would be in the Nuggets' favor for them to fall behind, especially by double digits, at any point in this series. Because I don't believe, like the Lakers, that the Timberwolves, mind you, sorry, would cough him up. I think on the flip side, my second point here is that the Timberwolves, in their sweep of the Phoenix Suns, they showed that they can hit the turbo button when they start smelling blood. And they put on third quarter runs, almost similarly to the way the Warriors used to, where in the third quarter, the Timberwolves play their best basketball. And not only do they play their best basketball, they absolutely wipe the floor of teams in the third quarter of these playoffs. And if the Denver Nuggets are to give Minnesota any sort of a sniff, if they were to fall behind in the second quarter, I think it could be over by the time the fourth quarter begins with how the Timberwolves play. So just based off the patterns, I'm not talking about the analysis in terms of how these two teams match up or anything. I'm just talking purely off of the notes that I have taken for both these sets, like the number one patterns that I have ticked off so far in these postseason. And the beautiful beauty of the postseason, it's unpredictable. Things can change. I can look back to the Orlando Magic and the Cavaliers series where it started out where there were 4 home sweeps, and then suddenly in the last 3 games, you had 3 close ball games, right? So things can change. Although that 7-0 from the home team in that series, for instance, did carry through. So some patterns do carry through, and it's always something to note. So without playing spoilers here, the Minnesota Timberwolves have already taken game 1 of this series. So they really do have home court advantage taken. And look, the Target Center, I believe, is a very difficult place now to get wins in this postseason. I think the Timberwolves play so well at the Target Center. That crowd is really, really ferocious. Wolves, ferocious. And when they go on those third quarter runs, the building absolutely erupts, and it's so hard to hold on or to stay intact with the Minnesota Timberwolves, to stay in touching distance when that building goes off and they start going on the runs and the momentum completely falls away from you. What I'm interested to see, because the Phoenix Suns as well were a very spineless team. They're out now. Okay, I could say whatever I want about them. This is just my honest analysis. I've got no feelings or any agendas against any teams really, except for the team now that's been eliminated, which are the Bucks. But so now moving forward now, I have no agendas against any of the remaining sides or any of the other sides that were eliminated. All I really care about is the success of my own team, which won't be happening this year. But what I'd say is that the Denver Nuggets are definitely a team that's not spineless. They're a team that, again, as I just mentioned, do play their best from behind. So I just wonder, something is going to have to give here. Will the Nuggets continue to be able to come from behind, or will they have to change their style? Are they going to have to start off games fast to try to break the will of the Timberwolves? Because at the end of the day, the experience is vastly on the side of the Denver Nuggets. They're the defending champions. They've been in this playoff game now for at least 5 years, 6 years, with Nikola Jokic and Murray, and kind of the way this team is built under Coach Mike Malone. And so I'm not going to completely go off of the pattern of this series in terms of making my prediction. This is a team with 2-time MVP, potentially another MVP on the way here this season. I don't know what this is doing on the screen. It's pretty funny. And a clutch shooter in Murray. I love MPJ. I think he was a player I was really excited about. I thought they got a steal when they took him. I thought he was the best player in his draft class, but obviously other circumstances led his stock drift to fall, and he just went and fell it correctly, almost by the force of God, into the correct situation. Aaron Gordon, who's been brilliant for them The Contavious Caldwell-Pope, I think, plays a really great role. Brown plays a really great role. So I think this is a Denver Nuggets team that is veteran. There's nothing that surprises them at this point, and that's what goes into their favor. What goes into the Minnesota Timberwolves' favor is the fact that they are an incredibly well-balanced, well-built team, and they have a superstar now in Anthony Edwards, who is starting to hit his prime. But not just hit his prime, but he's starting to... I remember just as a Bucks fan, the time when Giannis sort of, the light went on for him, and he figured it out, and he was like, you know what? I'm so damn good. No one can stop me. And that is a very powerful thing. And I think Anthony Edwards is now getting to his phase in his career. He's played now a few years in this league, and he's starting to realize just how good he is. Sometimes it's just about getting used to the pace of a new league. It's harder in a new league than in NBA than in college, right? We just know that. Then there's the next level when you get into the playoffs. And now Anthony Edwards has experienced both of those upticks in levels. And he's realizing now that I can assert myself in these games. My talent is still my talent. I just needed to figure out the mental side of the physical side of this game. And now that he's starting to get this light bulb in his head that goes, no one can stop me. And in game one of this series, even on the road against the Denver Nuggets, that light bulb went on in his head, and he closed out this series. He did not let the Nuggets do to them what they did to the Lakers. And so that first game was essentially my original starting points here, which were the 2 points, did come together. The Nuggets allowed the Timberwolves to take the lead in that third quarter after a third quarter run. And what happened afterwards was that the Timberwolves, unlike the Lakers, punished them for allowing them to go in front. And there was no comeback from Denver. And if anything, Anthony Edwards put the game away, and as he did in that Phoenix series. So, moving on to my prediction. This is a series that I'm thoroughly excited about. The game one, I'm just gonna be perfectly honest. The game one did not shock me, which is why I've not changed my prediction, because the game one followed exactly the pattern that I thought it would. And generally, those first games is like you're trying to feel out your next opponent. You've just moved from your previous series, and you're trying to figure out your next opponent. So if those patterns or those habits from the previous series were to be in play in this series, it was most definitely going to be game one. And I thought the Minnesota would go on the road and actually steal it. Which leads me to this point. I don't believe from this point forward, I cannot see the Minnesota Timberwolves losing a game at home. And this is how I see this series playing out. I do see the Nuggets winning game two and tying the series, which would, by the way, be the first loss of the season for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So the question would be then is how do the Timberwolves now in the playoffs deal with the adversity or deal with their first setback? But I think from their perspective, it's not losing game two wouldn't be quite a setback because they would know that they did their jobs going to Denver and getting one. Something that the Lakers weren't able to do now in 2 years. So, and again, the Denver Nuggets themselves are one of the hardest. Ball Arena in Denver, Colorado is one of the toughest arenas to play, especially with the altitude and the crowd. And for them to get that game one is a huge accomplishment. And unfortunately, I think I've got the Minnesota Timberwolves winning this series from a Denver Nuggets point of view in 6 games. I do think that the Timberwolves are going to go 3-1 up in this series. They're going to win games 3 and game 4. I think the Nuggets save their season in game 5. And the Timberwolves will close it out, I think, even in a tight ball game, because I just think it's hard to put away a team like the Nuggets. But I think they'll find a way to close it out in game 6. This was the way I felt the series was going to go heading into it. I actually thought the Timberwolves might win this one in 6 games, and it's nothing to do with the Denver Nuggets. I just think that the Timberwolves right now are starting to hit their peak. I love the matchup of Gobert against Jokic. I think that's a matchup that works really well for the Timberwolves. And not just that, they also put Karl Anthony Towns, who you're going to have to go out onto the perimeter as well to defend. So is Gordon going to be the man probably with the task of stopping Anthony Towns? He's a tricky player to defend because he's so good at the post, but he could also bring you out to the three-point, and he's just as good as anyone, really, as a three-point shooter. Add the fact that they have Mike Conley, who is he just calms everything down for them. He keeps everything ticking. He's the glue for this team. And then you have, McDaniels, who plays his role, and Anthony Edwards, who is now starting to look like a young Michael Jordan. And I said it in my review of the last game, but it's just the demeanor. It's the ability to self-motivate. Like he, at certain points in the game, he just gets angry and he's like, give me the rock. Let me take over this ball game. And it reminded me of Michael Jordan. Not the 6 championship Michael Jordan, but the one that was just starting to realize the powers he had. The 63 points against the Boston Celtics at the Garden, Michael Jordan. The one that just was on the edge of becoming who he was becoming. And that's what this Anthony Edwards reminds me of. And that's a scary thing. I'm starting to come around to the idea that he may well be the face of the NBA. I heard people talk about it recently on like all the TV shows. I heard Kendrick Perkins say it, and I'm starting to come around to the idea that could be true. I think because he's an American boy. I think he's got a great personality. He's really easy to advertise. Look, he's got his own controversies behind the scenes in his own personal life that he's had that I've seen on social media. But besides that, in terms of, he's not LeBron James in terms of being an absolute saint and an absolute role model, but he's more Michael Jordan, which is just a cold stone killer who is just a pure entertainer, and he's just got the personality and everything, and just you enjoy watching this guy play. Like, I'm excited to watch the Timberwolves play games. I really am. So that's my preview of this first series. I have just a recap, I do have the Minnesota Timberwolves moving on. I just think this is their time. I think this is their time, honestly. I'd love to see this team in the finals. Now moving on to the second matchup that I'm covering, and I'm going to cover this second as well because the NBA decided that this is the second game that's going to be aired in the second round, and that is in the Eastern Conference, and it is the first Eastern Conference semifinal between the New York Knicks, the 2nd seed, and the 6th seed, the Indiana Pacers. And here we go. You're finally going to see me talk about the Eastern Conference playoffs with the Milwaukee Bucks being completely irrelevant and taken out of the conversation. But you are going to hear a bit of saltiness from me in terms of, and regret, in terms of what I've seen from the Indiana Pacers and what I think will get exposed against the New York Knicks. And yeah, look, I've let it up. I've not even given you any. I've not given you any suspense in terms of what I think this series is going to be. And I think it's done less to do with the Indiana Pacers and more to do with the Knicks. So I am going to go and I'm going to give you my assessment of the series of the Bucks series specifically from the Indiana Pacers point of view and why it was so successful from what they did regardless of the Bucks. But I'm going to start here with the Knicks. And something I was noticing with the Knicks throughout this series against the 76ers, and even prior to that, because I called it. I did say in my preview about the Knicks, and it's about that Villanova core. There's something fearless about that Villanova core, and people have asked me recently, personally, not necessarily in any comments or anything, although you can be asking me things in comments, leaving comments in the Instagram or on these videos. But I got personal questions from friends who are watching the channel, so big up to you guys. Who on the Knicks are you talking about when you say that they had more clutch shooters than the 76ers? And obviously, I mean, outside of Brunson. And here's my answer to that. Let's take a trip back to a Villanova team that dominated NBA basketball. Won back-to-back NCAA tournaments. This was a team that was really well coached under Coach Jay Wright and was completely united and all had the ability to be clutch and hit massive shots when it counted the most. That core of that team now was Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, and Josh Hart. Now, obviously, Jalen Brunson that year was drafted in the second round by the Dallas Mavericks. DiVincenzo was a first rounder drafted by the Bucks, and Josh Hart was a second rounder drafted by the Lakers. Either second rounder or late first. I think he was a second rounder. I think he was a second rounder that year. But if you remember, take you back to that NCAA final, and you remember Dante DiVincenzo, the sixth man of the Villanova Wildcats, Dante DiVincenzo, who fearlessly, at the biggest moments of that game, just was cold. He shoots without giving a crap. Mind my language, right? And he was given the license to basically take over the ball game. This was a team, including Jalen Brunson, who was the outstanding player of that tournament, and which I still don't understand how he ended up being a second-round pick. Sometimes the evaluation of these players always shocks me because you see guys who are amazing in the tourney, and all of a sudden they're second-rounders, and you're like, have I missed anything? And then they go on to the NBA, and they're exactly what you think. And I think it's when they mix some of these other players from other countries or players who play in G League Ignite, sort of the other different pathways that, for me, have kind of ruined the NBA draft and the ability for me to do analysis. But that's another thing for a whole other day. I just think the NFL has it right in terms of the NCAA system producing the top picks. Like, I'm able to go through an NFL draft and properly evaluate every single player because everyone is playing on a level playing field. Like, I would have loved to see a guy like Wemby do what Ben Simmons did, which is before going to the NBA, play a year in the NBA. But I also in NCAA. But I also think I don't like the one and done stuff either. There are some players that are so great that they can be one and done, and if they can properly pass that test, like LeBron James, Kobe, KG, those type of players were amazing in high school, and you knew that they were going to be great, and it was like, let's not waste our time. Let's just put them straight into the league. I think that was a day and age when you're allowed to take players from high school, but I actually liked the idea that they made them play at least 1 year in the NCAA because I think you need a college education. I think college coaching is great, nearly grounds you, it teaches you great fundamentals. So it's not just about skill, it's also about basketball IQ. And the players that were exception to those rules already had proven to you they have great basketball IQ, i.e. LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, KG, just to name a few. But to be able to watch those NCAA March Madness tournaments, I was always used to be able to kind of get an idea, just like I'm able to do in college football, get an idea of the talent of the best players, watching them play in clutch situations in a playoffs where it's win and go home and see who rises to the test. I remember guys like back in the day, Kevin Durant, Derrick Rose, those type of players. Talking about Mike Conley in the previous one, like even Mike Conley even playing with Greg Oden, like the Florida Gators guys, Noah. Like I was able to watch some of those guys. Those were the best times. Those are the best times. Watching James Harden play at Arizona, watching Westbrook play at UCLA. Like, you know what I mean? Like those players, Kyrie at Duke. You know, like that was the era. And I felt like these Villanova players fell into those categories and somehow were misdrafted. Dante became the first rounder, and that's because I think that my Bucks did a good evaluation on him. Unfortunately, they didn't do. They were impatient with the injury issues that he had, and they traded him way too easily, basically for nothing. And I still would regret that to this moment. But I think now he's found the right home now in New York, and I'm happy for him because he's playing with his best friends. And yeah, so basically those Villanova, when I talk about the guys who can hit the clutch shots, I'm talking Brunson, I'm talking DiVincenzo, and I'm talking Hart. And throughout the 76ers series, that's exactly what they did. And Jalen Brunson himself has evolved now, just like I was talking about Anthony Edwards, into one of the NBA's top players. He's got ice in his veins. The moment is never too big for him. And the amount of 40-point games that he put together in that 76ers series was just legendary. It cannot go under the radar. It cannot be ignored. When we talk about NBA superstars next year, Jalen Brunson needs to be right at the top of the list because NBA playoff performances, for me, weigh the heaviest. That's where the respect is really earned. That's when I really start crowning you. That's why there are certain players who I call overrated because they've never been able to step up and pass that playoff test by themselves, for instance. And it's not just about one star, it's about a team. It's not about a collection of stars, it's about the team. And being able to be a leader and inspire role players and bring them along with you, that's really key. And Jalen Brunson is doing all of that. This New York Knicks team is more of an image of Jalen Brunson than it is of Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau has had a great coaching career. He coached obviously the Bulls. He's coached the Timberwolves. But none of those teams seemed as united and as potent as this current New York Knicks team. And I think it's got to do a lot with the culture that Jay Wright built at Villanova, which is now starting to seep its way into New York. And that's why the Madison Square Garden is lit the way it is. And they have a New York Knicks team that is now very, very likable. Now I move on to the Indiana Pacers. And I'm just going to get out the way to begin so I can properly evaluate. I'm going to tell you one thing. And this is the salty part on the Bucks stuff. And then I'm going to continue wrapping this up because we're already gone over 10 minutes in terms of this segment. There was no Giannis Antetokounmpo at all in the other series. Talking about the best player in the world. The Indiana Pacers should have expected to win without Giannis. I think one of the reasons I did pick the Bucks in the series was based off the game one and the NBA playoff experience that they showed versus the Pacers, but also with the idea that at some point Giannis would feature, which never happened. And in terms, it actually went in the opposite direction where games 4 and games 5 were, without Damian Lillard either, right? And game 3, the Bucks came so close to winning too. But this is what I feel like about the Indiana Pacers and what they did well to beat the Bucks. The Indiana Pacers as well are a team that's very united and very streaky. And once they go on a run, it's very hard to stop. The depth, the amount of players in that team that can kill you, the TJ McConnells coming off the bench while in the minutes Halliburton isn't featuring, he is so fearless. He just gets to the cup and he's able to really keep that bench unit. And it's when you're able to not have your stars on the floor and for the bench unit to still be able to dominate any unit on the floor is really incredible. The work rate, the hustle of the Indiana Pacers is something to be commended. The second chance opportunities they get for themselves just because they work harder than their opponents. That's been a theme from them the entire year, that they have always outworked their opponents. I think they're a team who's really well drilled. I think Rick Carlisle deserves a lot of credit for what he's done with this team. I know Tyrese Halliburton has been the one taking the headlines in the breakout season and the second time All-Star appearance, and he's been incredible. But really, in these playoffs, I wouldn't have said that it's about Tyrese Halliburton. I don't think, for instance, like with an equivalent, like Tyrese Halliburton started the NBA All-Star game ahead of Jalen Brunson, and now you've seen the two of them play in the postseason. I still think that Jalen Brunson is miles ahead of Halliburton. I even think Damian Lillard is still miles ahead of Halliburton, even though they lost the series. Like in the games where Lillard featured, he really asserted himself into the game. I think Halliburton is just kind of just what's the word I'm looking here? Blends in with the rest of his team, and he hits shots, and like when everybody else is firing, he's firing. But when they're not, he's also not firing. Like what's one thing? Like my great player, when I'm going through a cold stretch, should be the one who goes, nah, let's. And for me, the player that was doing that for the Pacers was Pascal Siakam. That addition for them at the trade deadline is the reason why they're here. I think even without Giannis, the Bucks would have been able to beat Indiana without Pascal Siakam if Siakam was still in Toronto. That's the real star. That's the guy who's won an NBA championship, who's got the experience. He's the main driving force. And when the rest of the team looked inexperienced, it was Siakam, who's been an NBA champion, who used his experience to pull everyone up. In terms of the way this series plays out, I think the New York Knicks win this series in 5 games. I do. I just don't. I think their fans travel well. I think they embarrassed Philadelphia 76ers at Wells Fargo twice, and they don't really care. And there were games, especially that game 3 against the Bucks, where I felt like the Pacers were there to be gotten. And as I mentioned with the Timberwolves, there's a positive naivety of the Knicks that they just don't care. They don't care about the pressure. They're obviously having fun, and they got players who are able to step up in the biggest moments. So I think the Knicks will go out to a 2-0 lead. I think the Pacers will go home. They'll win Game 3, and I think the Knicks will steal Game 4, and they'll close it out in Game 5. That's the way I kind of see this series. I think the Knicks are on a great momentum. I think that they had a tougher opponent in the last round with the 76ers than the Indiana Pacers. I think the Indiana Pacers wouldn't have gotten here if it wasn't for the fact that they played a Milwaukee Bucks team without Giannis. Like, they were really helped out there. Something was off about the Bucks, and the Pacers exposed it. I think what they have with the New York Knicks is not the same story. You have a Knicks team that's full of belief, full of talent, really hungry, feeling themselves, and I think this is the year the Knicks make the Eastern Conference Finals, and I have the Knicks winning this series in 5 games. Now, moving on now to a preview that I've really been looking forward to, because I have to kind of make up for my evaluation of the Oklahoma City Thunder in my previous NBA show. And I've had a really deep think about it. And obviously the circumstances have changed at this moment in time. This is a series that I think is incredibly intriguing, and I'm really interested to see. It's one of the series that I'll sit back with my notebook and take notes of specific moments in this series. And the questions I have for this are the following. Are the Oklahoma City Thunder legit? And I've been thinking about that. I actually had that question going on back and forth in my mind for about the last week now since they've had the sweep completed of the Pelicans. And I think I'm still leaning towards I need to see it in this second round. But I'm also leaning towards the Thunder advancing. And the Los Angeles Clippers was a team that I thought they'd be playing. And I thought the Clippers would have had an edge because of the overall playoff experience and those stars that they had. Those stars having been the graduates, basically, of the Oklahoma City Thunder of the past. So we're talking about Harden and Westbrook and Paul George, like just themselves, right? So they're all former Thunder players. And a Tyronn Lue being a championship coach. I thought that would have played a massive role. Jason Kidd and his Dallas Mavericks are a very different team, but they're a team that really impressed me. So originally I would have said, oh, the Thunder caught a break. But having watched the series, I actually think the Thunder now have the tougher team. And it really depends here on Kyrie and more specifically actually than Luka, because I think Luka is a consistent performer who has proven to cement himself as a top 5 player. Kyrie is the one that has the mood swings. Kyrie is the one who has impressed me in that first round because he's really been on it. And this is a Kyrie Irving that I don't recognize, that I haven't seen basically since his days in Cleveland. And that's a clutch player who he's able to go on spurts and will his team hit buckets after bucket after bucket, and it can be completely unstoppable. And that's a version of Kyrie Irving I think everyone knows exists, but the motivation hasn't necessarily been there for a while now. And it really was on show against the Clippers in that previous series. The matchup of Kyrie Irving and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander intrigues me. I know you'd say, oh, Shai and Luka, because obviously those were the starters for the Western Conference backcourt. But it's more Shai against Kyrie, because those are the players that I feel like when they're really on it, they can really carry their team. And I know Luka could also carry the team, but he's more taken the back seat to Kyrie. He's let Kyrie be the closer, which I think has been smart. Like, even that game where they lost in Game 4 to the Clippers at home, they were down 31, and Kyrie almost wheeled them all the way back. And he was the one who impressed me, and he was the one who impressed me thereafter in Games 5 and 6 to help close it out. Now, Luka was excellent as well in Game 5 away in LA. But that Game 6 was all Kyrie. Like, what a masterpiece by Kyrie in that Game 6, especially in the second half. And that's what I'm talking about by experience. Like, Kyrie is a NBA champion with the Cleveland Cavaliers, but it's more about if he was willing to be there and really fully commit, which I feel now in Dallas he is. So this is the test here now for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who easily put away, after a difficult Game 1 with the Pelicans, and I'm going to admit here that was the game that made me think that it was going to be a close series. That was obviously far from accurate. I love what the Thunder have in terms of, like, I keep for some reason I just can't stop comparing the Thunder to the Orlando Magic. Like, if you put Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the Orlando Magic, I feel like you also have a number 1 seed. So that Shai is obviously the player that separates himself. But then I look at Jalen Williams. There's actually 2 Jalen Williams, but I'm talking about the one he starts. And then I look at Chet Holmgren, and I think that's a big 3 that is really underrated and very talented. Like, the talent is undeniable. it's actually really scary. I think this is a Thunder team that is not going to go away anytime soon. And they have looked very connected. I love the fact that at the end of every single game, they all huddle together for the post-match interview. I love the atmosphere. It's like almost a college-like atmosphere, especially when they play at home in front of that Thunder crowd, which has always been notorious to be great, especially in the playoffs. It's one of the most fun arenas when it's really going off. And I think the Thunder fans have really bought into this new team. And one thing I really appreciate is a team that's willing to understand that they had a ceiling and a team that was limited, and they were willing to move off that. And that's the way I felt when they had Russell Westbrook, that Russell Westbrook era. I'm like, this team every year just seems limited, and they're going in the same place. Like, they put different stars next to Russell Westbrook to try to see if it works. At one point, they put Carmelo Anthony, and at one point, they put Paul George. And I thought, and they also had CP3. No, CP3 was afterwards. Yeah, but I kind of felt like Russell Westbrook was limited to them, and Paul George was limiting them in certain respect. Like that series specifically, the one where Dame waves them goodbye, waved basically the end of that was the end of the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? Paul George ends up in LA, and Russell Westbrook ends up in the Rockets, obviously ultimately ending up in LA to team up with Paul George again. But that was a team that was limited, and they were willing to just completely cut the cord on that, start from the beginning. Because look, one asset they have is, I believe, is one of the best GMs in the National Basketball League, in Sam Presti. And he was able to build a good young core to begin with. And if there was anyone who was able to be, he's a great talent evaluator more than anything. He's probably the greatest talent evaluator in the NBA today. I'm just straight up. I think this guy is amazing. He rarely whiffs on draft picks. Like honest to God. And I'm not surprised that he got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in that Paul George trade, as well as 8 different first round draft picks. That was insane. And the foresight that he had to be able to rebuild this team now, and they destroyed it, and they've rebuilt it from the ground up, and the roots of this team, the tree that they are building is just magnificent. I think it's got such a high ceiling, and it's a completely different culture. The original Oklahoma City culture was that of Kevin Durant's, James Harden's, Russell Westbrook's, and and I don't even need to say more about the mentality and what those types of players have become, right? This is a different team. This is a team not full of egos, a team that they just love each other and they love to play together, and it's a really infectious energy. And there's something about that. The next test for them here is when they had to play against the Dallas Mavericks side. Now, Luka's already taken them to a Western Conference Finals before. Kyrie's been an NBA champion. This is a team that has not necessarily, I can't say done that, but been here. And it's also a team that's always embraces being an underdog. And they play their best when no one believes in them. So, this is the test here, I believe, for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I've really had a back and forth thought about this in the last, since the Mavericks eliminated the Clippers. And it's still hard because I think it can go either way. I literally close my eyes and I think the series can go either way. I can see where Kyrie plays spoiler and he goes to Oklahoma and he puts on a really good show with Luka. But I think the culture of the Thunder is different. I just think maybe my final conclusion is that the Thunder win in 7 games. I do have OKC winning in 7 games. I think ultimately overall, I think they have a deeper bench. I think it's hard to get wins in Oklahoma. And there's just something, when I close my eyes, I see the Thunder and the Timberwolves playing in the Western Conference Finals. Regardless of all the other experienced sides around them, when I close my eyes after watching the first round, that's all I can see. So I'm putting the Oklahoma City Thunder through in 7 games because of that. I think I don't know how the first 6 are going to unfold, but I know that it's going to end up 3-3 somehow. And I think that crowd, in some sort of fashion, and I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it'll be really close. I think it'll be tight. We'll get them over the line in Game 7. It's hard for me to put a full analysis on this series because there's so many unknowns. I think they played a pushover in round 1. The Dallas Mavericks are not a pushover. They're a team that are also, at this moment in time, playing for each other and enjoying playing together. I've loved the additions that they made midway through the year. I think Jason Kidd is doing a really good job. I hear a lot of criticism last year, and people were wondering if he was really the man for them. But I think there's a respect that Kyrie has for him specifically, which has gotten Kyrie to play ball, and I think that's a really down to Jason Kidd. Honestly, I've seen this guy play for so many different coaches, and for him, he's played for Brad Stevens. He also played for Steve Nash, who himself was a respectful NBA point guard, one of the a former MVP, and even he couldn't get a tune out of Kyrie in terms of a commitment. But there's something about the Jason Kidd project that he's really bought into, and I've got so much time after watching this series for the Dallas Mavericks now. I'm starting to turn around on Kyrie. But let's see how it goes on. So it's hard because I haven't seen it. Now you're gonna have a veteran, a more experienced opponent for the Thunder, a team that can navigate NBA playoff series. And you have a Thunder team that's so together but also so inexperienced, and I'm still gonna use that. But even regardless, they've somewhat turned me around on them. And that's going to lead us now to a Western Conference Finals on my prediction. Potentially, and obviously, we'll preview the real matchup in the Western Conference Finals. But the Timberwolves against the Thunder would be mine in my preview. And I think it's an outlook. I think that's a heavyweight battle between two sides who are both feeling out this NBA playoff thing, who are both starting to really understand the power that they possess, the talent that they have, and that's going to be a really fun one. So, just to recap, so many things to look forward to this series. I'm just intrigued because of the unknowns, and I do have the Thunder. My gut tells me the Thunder are winning this in 7. Now, we will preview our 4th and final matchup of these conference semifinals, and that's the second Eastern Conference semifinal, and that is now the confirmed matchup of the Boston Celtics, the number 1 seed, against the number 4 seed, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I think this is a series that I'm much more made up my mind on than some of the other ones. And that's because the Boston Celtics are so damn good. I don't really see a team, unless it's the Denver Nuggets, and I've had them eliminated in my preview here, that I can see beating the Boston Celtics. I just think they're so much better than everyone else. And I think this is a team that has been trying to rebuild the team around Tatum and Brown. You've seen so many different versions of this team. And they're an organization that is so well run. They moved Brad Stevens, who was their longtime head coach, up into the front office to replace Danny Ainge, who went to Utah. And they've got Joe Mazzulla, who's been such a brilliant young head coach. And this is the final form, I think, of the Boston Celtics. I felt that if this version of the Celtics did not work, the Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Derek White, Boston Celtics. I'm talking about that core around Tatum and Brown. I thought if that didn't work, that this is the year that would be the last for Tatum and Brown. One of them would be moved on. There were rumors already in previous years of like Jaylen Brown getting traded. I thought one time he might get traded to the Nets for KD or something. Like I never really bought into those things. So many people have been trying to pull apart the two J's in Boston, and I think this is the year now. I think it's overdue. I think they're deserving. The resume they've put together of playoff series, the disappointments that they've cataloged together. I think this is the year now that they must go and take the Larry O'Brien trophy, and I'd be exceptionally surprised if they didn't. I don't really see many stumbling blocks for them. In terms of who's left in the East, so of course I've got the Knicks and the Pacers, right? I don't see either of those teams beating Boston, and I certainly do not see the Cavs beating Boston. That being said, though, I do think this is going to be a closer series. My issue here with the Cleveland Cavaliers is that as well as they did make it through the Orlando Magic, there were many times in that series that I thoroughly was not impressed. And that was more specifically in Games 3 and Games 4, when I thought that they were going to crush them and that they were going to sweep them, and they got completely obliterated in those games. They just got out of jail in Game 7. I thought at halftime, I'm like, damn, the Magic are going to do this, aren't they? And for me, if you can't get up against that Orlando Magic's team, they've got no chance of the Boston Celtics. There's a chance that they could pull out one game, I think, potentially in this series. And that's me being nice. But I think, Donovan Mitchell could be special on certain games, especially at home. I think it could go anywhere from a sweep to a 6-game series where the Boston Celtics win. I don't think the Celtics need much to beat this Cavs team. I just think they're so good. Honestly, I think they're so good. Because Darius Garland has come alive in this series, in that late on in that series. Evan Mobley made some important stops, especially like at that Game 5 comes to mind for me for Cleveland. But I just don't know. Look, the thing is, when I'm looking back on the regular season, the Cavaliers had caused the Celtics problems. So I can't ignore that in terms of their regular season matchups, where the Cavs actually one of the teams that actually caused the Celtics the most problems. So from that point of view, I would not be surprised if this is a 6-gamer. I see this being, I'm going to call it Celtics in 6 at the end, because you know what? This is a conference semifinals, and the Cavaliers are not the Miami Heat missing Jimmy Butler. Like it's a better team, and I do think it's a team that plays really well in Cleveland. So I see it maybe Celtics go up 2-0, and then the Cavs actually wins Game 3 and Game 4. That's what I'm going to give them. I'm going to give them Game 3 and Game 4 as response. But then I see the Boston Celtics potentially even blowing him out in a Game 5 at the Garden, and then having a Game 6 that was similar to this Game 7, with the exception being that the Boston Celtics will smell blood and put him away. Like, if the Celtics go to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse up 18 in the second quarter of a Game 6 deciding one, I'd almost shut the lights out on that series. They are not the Magic, but in fact, they're 5 times as good as the Orlando Magic. And I think this is a team, and they've made it very clear to you from that press conference where they introduced Drew Holiday that they have unfinished business to do, and they are only looking at the NBA title, and that's what I think ultimately they will achieve this year. I'm so convinced that the Celtics are going to be the champions this year. I just don't really see any other answer to that. I just don't see anything else but that happening. So I think it's a straightforward one. I could just keep going on here and praising the Celtics for hours and hours and hours, but ultimately these previews, when it comes to the Celtics, there's not much more I can say, because they are, for me, the most, by far and away, best team remaining in these NBA playoffs, and that includes the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets caught a break. They didn't have to play the Celtics last year, but this Boston Celtics team this year is way better than the one from last year. And yeah, I think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they finally gonna get the championship that they crave. But anyway, those have been my previews of the conference semifinals. So if things are to go to the way that I have predicted, which obviously my first round wasn't accurate necessarily on everything, it would be the Timberwolves and the Thunder and the Cavs and the Knicks. Sorry, the Celtics and the Knicks. Those would be really intriguing series. I do think, I was just talking about how great the Celtics are. I think the Knicks is the one team in the East that could challenge them the most, just because of the familiarity. I think the guts that they have, the connection. Jalen Brunson, I could see him really keeping them in, and that's going to be an interesting preview that I'd have to ponder later on. But I think those have been the teams in basketball this year that have been impressive the most. And ultimately, those would be the four teams that deserve to be in the conference finals. Let's see if things play out to that way. But I hope you've been enjoying this preview. Watch out for my NBA dailies, right? These are going to be that first round was a bit of a slog, but now that we're only down to 4 matchups, I think it's a lot more easy to maintain now in terms of those. So I've been getting a lot of great feedback about my NBA dailies on the Instagram. Still haven't necessarily set up the TikTok. That we're going to really try to push. We're just really starting out on this channel, and I'm still taking my time on all the platforms to establish this. So I'm not really in a rush necessarily. At the moment, I'm just trying to get this content out there, get everyone noticing it, get everyone on board, and we've got so much work to do with this channel. So if you really enjoyed this preview, because I enjoy doing this preview, I enjoy recording this preview for you guys, hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed it. Literally, if you enjoyed it and you're entertaining, like I've heard people go like, "Oh, Anton, I just watched your video. Oh man, that's so good." And I'm like, "Did you subscribe? Did you like?" And I'm like, "Why?" "Oh, I will. Well, everyone, get to it, okay? Yeah, I know you're going to be watching this video. I know you're going to be like, damn, Anton is right about some of these matchups, and you're going to want to see what happens next. Because as well, even if I'm wrong, then you can watch this video, hold me accountable, hit the comments on my Instagram and be like, that didn't age well, or okay, backtracking now. Like I know I got lots of people who on the outside can, give me stick. Give it to me, man. Like if I'm right or wrong, if I'm covering your favorite team, I'm loving some of the I've been getting some support from certain fans of other teams that are now like following me on a regular basis, and I'm loving that stuff. So hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like, subscribe. We got the Premier League show coming out as well. That was a really exciting weekend of Premier League action. So that's coming up for all my Premier League fans. So we'll look out for that one. But until then, God bless all of you guys. Hot Sport is lighting up now, and peace out.